Hello everyone, welcome to Baya Experience Center. My name is Sachi and I manage the Experience Center. I'm Shivani's daughter and have been a part of Baya only for a year now. I have a background in film and I'm looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have today. So let me start by introducing the esteemed women on our panel today. So first is Brinda Miller, as we all know. But Brinda Miller studied at Parsons School of Design and Sir J.J. School of Art. Her work fuses architectural elements with abstract urban spaces across diverse mediums. As Honorable Chairperson of the Kalagora Association, she drives public art initiatives in Mumbai, curates murals, and consults for CSMBS. Brinda is also a dear friend of Shivani and has always been encouraging, open, and a thoughtful person. She has been a supporter of Catalyst for Social Action in Baya through the years. We welcome you once again to our space and thank you for being here. About Roshni Shirzad. She is a partner at SJK Architects, a Mumbai-based collective shaping spaces through climate, culture, history, and technology. She studied at Rachna Sansad and was visiting faculty till 2014, which is very cool. That's a full circle moment. She is recognized among India's top 30 under 45 design disruptors by Forbes and was recently featured in the cover story of Architecture and Design, a magazine highlighting SJK's dynamic approach towards collaboration in architectural practices and above all, Roshni's values, craftsmanship and cultural narratives and innovation, and we are also delighted to host you here today. And last but not the least, Shivani Jain. Shivani Dasgupta Jain is the founder of Baya Design, where she plays matchmaker between ancient crafts and modern spaces. Establishing Baya in 2009 after a spiritual exploration, she was convinced that her Excel sheets couldn't capture the soul of Indian artistry. Her design studio proves that heritage can be both preserved and Instagram-worthy. Not satisfied with just one mission, she also co-founded Catalyst for Social Action and founder of Hand for Handmade. Shivani has led Baya to win the IBDA Award 6 years in a row and has won BW Women Entrepreneur of the Year, which demonstrates that having your hands in multiple creative pots doesn't mean you can't stir them all. Fun fact, Shivani, along with her fondness for the Baya bird, she's also fond of a lot of other animals and birds. And she has rescued a pigeon recently and other two in the past. A very compassionate and loving person who is always the soul of the place, Shivani.
Imagine being famous for rescuing pigeons.
Yeah, but it's wonderful when your own daughter says that.
I think.
So, to begin our discussion today, I would like to start the conversation with a question. And that is, how did your career begin? And was there a defining moment when you knew this was your path? And this is open to all, and we can start off the conversation.
So should I start? Okay, so I think I realized I was an artist when I was 7 years old, and there was no one in the family who was an artist, so it was quite a surprise to me when the teachers came up to me and said, "Oh, you're so good at drawing, you're so good at," and we were all very surprised. My parents were also very surprised. So they all had good taste, the aesthetics were good in the family and all of that. So it was one of those things which happened very, very organically. But when I kind of became old enough to choose a career, and my father said, "No, I think you should take something where you can earn some money." That was the main thing. And though women those days didn't work so much, but for my father, who was extremely, he was very empowering. He loved the women in his family, he loved his daughters. And he would say my daughters are the favorite. My, of course, brother didn't mind at all. But it was one of those things where we were like, again, we grew up very naturally thinking that, we have to make something of our lives, whatever the career, whatever we decide, whatever we want to choose. And so that's how I joined JJ School of Arts, and that's how I started my career. And of course, along the way, lots has changed. So many new things have happened in my life after that. And I always say that my life began at 40. That's when I kind of joined the Kalagoda Association, and I volunteered. I said, I want to volunteer and I want to do something different, something new. Painting is fine, I'm doing fine with it, but I think it kind of, both these careers kind of helped each other, I would say. And, it became a sort of ambitious, that ambition kind of got realized at that point that yes, I want to do something different, I want to do something creative, which is not just painting. So that's why the Kalagoda Festival. And of course, now it's 25 years, it's the 25th festival that we just finished with. And I think it's only there because of the continuity of all the people who work for it. And also, we are all passionate and the drive is there to do that. So here I am, and that's my story.
You want me to go? So, first of all, thank you. This is such a great turnout. So amazing to see everyone and so many new faces for me, and we're looking forward to catching up after this.
Also, we must thank Ashish. She's the only guy.
Yes!
Wonderful. It's
the
so
only
nice.
guy now. I
My
always
husband
land
is
up in
standing
places where I'm the
And
only
not
guy.
only me,
No, please call him. Please call him in.
he's standing outside.
You can put
I
it
thought
up
only
here.
women are there.
No. Please.
So, thank you, Shivani and Sachi, for moderating this. I'm the eldest out of three siblings. We are a simple, born in a simple Maharashtrian family. We used to live in Dadar when we were much younger. So very, very middle class, simple family. And before I decided that I enjoyed design or that's really the career that I wanted to get into, I think the ability that how a space can make you feel is, I think, the origins, or rather, when I found out that, I'm feeling very different over here. What is it? And that was actually my great-grandmother's house. So we used to stay in Dadar, and my great-grandmother stayed in Berlin. And, I used to go there quite often with my grandmother because she wanted to go and visit her mother. And unlike the homes in Dadar, somehow Parel homes were much larger and great height. And I remember the kitchen was so large that those early memories of being in that house are something that I can never shake off. The house doesn't exist, those people don't exist, but that memory is so strong. And later when, I decided that I was at a threshold where I could either go into fashion or design, and I think at some point I chose design. And I feel now, on the hindsight, when I think about it, all those memories had, something to do with it, because I think the ability that a space can make you feel, just I'm sure when a lot of you all entered over here, there was that, immediate sort of aha moment that when you just walk out of like a hot, outside and you come in, and I believe space has a lot of power to how you can feel, what it does for you. So I think that's really what made me get into design. I passed out now about 20 years ago, and I worked initially with Samira Rathod. I think anyone who's familiar with design and architecture would know. I worked with Samira for about a year, and that was very interesting again because she has a very, very strong design language. But I think the trajectory of my life, career, path, whatever you call it, changed when I joined SJK. So the firm that I'm a partner in at, that's Shimu Javeri Kadri, who was is the founder of the practice. This is a 35-year-old practice, and yeah, I think that was my turning point in this sort of in the world of design, because somewhere I think it was the people again in this organization. There's I could have, like, Samira has fantastic design sort of sensibility and aesthetics, but I think I found my footing at SJK, and I've been there now for about 18 years, and sometimes it really feels like a blink and a miss, but it's really been, I was 22 when I joined, so literally I think I've done all my growing up with these people and this practice. So that's my story.
So, my story is that I kind of got onto design pretty early on, studied at NID. I knew I used to sketch and draw and paint and all of that. But my entry into crafts was sort of a meandering journey. I kind of started as in the digital space, working with a Tata company, and set up their design studio, and we were the first multimedia company, so to say. It was like way back in the year 2000 roundabout that we had set up this interactive media, multimedia, digital design kind of thing straight from NID. That was my second job. I joined O&M as a visualizer, but I didn't want to be in advertising. I felt something is missing. Then I started my career with the Tata, spent 6-7 years over there, and it was a very hot space, as it is even now, right? I got to go to SIGGRAPH abroad, and this conference, that conference, and then there were always, people who were, you got to see Steve Jobs in conferences and stuff like that, and it was actually magical. But I don't know, every time I used to feel that as a designer, how can I make much more of a social impact? And I remember that every time I used to travel with my mother, I used to see these artisans sitting around in bazaars. And when they were sitting in the bazaar, they used to have their little different stones, colored stone idols. Someone would have some brass stuff, someone would have. So, there was a bunch of different things. And it just fascinated me at that time when I was a kid traveling with my mom. Bongs travel everywhere. Wherever they can, they take their children and everything and just go. So, when I kind of remembered that, and then I had a great professor at NID, Professor M.P. Ranjan, who has written this brilliant book, Handmade in India. And he has actually inspired a lot of us at NID. And he said, look, why don't you marry digital art with artisan space? Do something for them. Start something. So I started a very early e-commerce site for handicrafts, and we were the first actually. And we were so early on that it was around 2000, and that was also the time that the bubble burst, the dot-com bubble. We got our initial funding, we were funded by the Tatas, etc. But the big funding didn't come because nobody believed that crafts can be scaled. And if you remember, she was with me there. And we just didn't make it to the big round of funding. We ran it ourselves for a good number of years. Then I sold it off to my investors, and then I kind of came back to the craft space because the space is just so addictive. There's so much to know, and it's so fascinating. You take a simple craft and you dig, and there are thousands such crafts in India. So my journey has been a bit of meandering here and there. I remember I'd applied for a job with Preeti Vyas charity, and she introduced me to her CEO, and she said, this girl has done everything, this, that, where can we put her? So it was that kind of thing. And I think I found my calling with the craft space and artisanal space, because I feel very satisfied that on the one hand I can engage them, have them learn new things with me, expose them to the markets today, and at the same time I'm learning from them. There's an incredible amount to learn from. So that is how I kind of came into this space. Yeah.
My following question to your very diverse answers based on your experience is in the field of art and architecture as women and as people of craft, art and design. Where do societal expectations play a role and how have you channeled these expectations into your professional work? And these can be a multitude of types of expectations and types of society, societal challenges per se. But how have you all navigated this in your professional life, spanning over, a number of years?
Do you want to answer this question?
Sorry?
Do you want to?
I think, more than societal challenges, I think every project that we do is no short of a challenge. Be it a small retail space that we are designing, or a museum in Gujarat to a hotel in Hampi. I think right from the beginning, so I'll give an example of this Hampi hotel that we are designing, which is a space very, very close to my heart. It's going to be a Taj. Now Hampi has, doesn't really have those many hotels. It's a fabulous sort of location, a world heritage site. Now with this project, what we were really hoping to do, again in the space of craft and culture, is through research we found out that just 50 kilometers around our site, there are about 4 or 5 craft clusters that are working at a very small level but doing incredible work. A hotel is a hotel at the end of the day. You're building very consciously, sustainably. That is something that this practice has been doing since before sustainability was such a buzzword, but that's just what we do and how we practice for the last 25 years. But the way we are looking at craft has shifted, hugely, because we are seeing the possibility that it has, that it can actually be scaled if you give the artisans and the craft cluster the ability and the understanding of how to go about. And all of this is so exciting to me right now because I've just come back from doing a little mock-up room for this hotel where like a large chunk of the budget, which is everything is so tight on budget, was given to craft. And here was a client. Through a lot of conversations, we were able to shift their thinking into saying that of course people come and do CSR initiatives, but there's a real ability for you to improve, not just the livelihoods, but also give them the ability. There's a saying where you give a man a fish and he'll eat dinner that night, but you teach him how to fish and he'll eat, for the rest of his life. And I think that's really what currently something that we're trying very hard through wherever we are building is just give people the ability to see what they can do. That's just one of the things.
So I think it's not so much about societal. I think there are many other factors that are deterrents. One of them is, of course, budgets. As I'm sure you will agree, on everything there is so much of negotiation and so much. I also find that of course, I deal with crafts in a different way because at the Kalagoda festival we have a lot of craft stalls, and we are so lucky that we have a sponsor who kind of helps the craftspeople. They bring the craftspeople to Kalagoda. They don't charge them for the stall. They pay us for the stall. And then they also kind of put them up somewhere. They look after their accommodation. They look after their food. That's a big deal, because it takes a lot to do all those things. And it's very interesting that these guys do all that. But on the other hand, when we have to do our bit also, which we do, we also give out some free stalls to people and crafts people who are deserving, and we do it absolutely gratis. Then we have, of course, the other side of it, which is the commercial side of it, which pays for this part of it. So we get a lot of criticism for that. Honestly, we get a lot of praise also for it. So we have to just keep nodding our heads and saying yes, of course, of course. But the point is that we do have a lot of stalls where people are, selling designer clothes also out on the street, but it's designer clothes, and maybe the prices are not so bad and all of that. So people say, oh, but why do you have stalls like this? But the fact is, we don't have stalls like, say, we don't sell rubber chappals. We are very careful of those things. So I think that's good enough. I think so. But yes, sometimes people come up to us and say a lot of things. Oh, this time the stalls are not so good. This time, next time, you should do this. We get a lot of advice. That's the other thing that's very annoying, because advice comes free and unsolicited, and we have to be patient and not react and say, yeah, sure, next time I'll keep it in mind, and things like that. So another thing that we don't do is we don't put out paintings or things on the street, because that's not the place. We don't have place for such things.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of installations. We try to encourage craftspeople to take part. We had a large Lippen horse this time, which was beautiful. Right now it's actually sitting in the World Trade Center. So things like that, I feel, is our way of contribution. Regarding, and also a lot of awareness has been created. Again, I won't say it's societal. It is more like, oh, the Kalagoda. Where can I buy that thing which I saw? I think, Sunita, you also asked me that question. Where can I buy that? Unfortunately, it's not there anymore. So there is a lot of, the crafts people do a lot of business, even from just making contacts. So that, I think, is a big deal. Also, a lot of people, want to do, it's like you say, somebody would like to do this kind of work on their walls or their door or whatever. So we get a lot of that also. So I wouldn't say it's a challenge. I think we're getting there, and I think it's getting much better.
I think, like you said, just creating awareness is so important right now.
Absolutely.
That, and even at a very grassroots or a small level, you start with it. It builds, it takes shape and form.
It's not just about the crafts, it's in the music, it's in the dance, it's in the theatre, and it's in, the visual artists. They all get known there. So many people have, become famous over the years, and, they come back to me and say, we started at Kalagoda. This was the first place where we, recently I was at the museum and there were some stalls there. And all those fellows, they're taken from our Kalagoda, so they all recognized me.
Okay.
And so it's nice because they get exposure.
New exposures. No, but I think that Bombay as a city didn't know crafts or culture. In the way the Delhi does. Delhi, there's crafts at every nook corner and of every lane. And the Golden Triangle, Jaipur, Delhi, and Agra. They form a very virtuous cycle which builds the crafts and the cultural aspects of Delhi and Bombay. Somehow I feel the Kalagoda festival, since it started, generally the awareness of culture itself has grown.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge role to play. And I see that in Bombay especially, now there are a lot more cultural spaces, lot more. There's Baya, there's artisans, there's many shops here, even Bombay Stores has some crafts and stuff like that. So it's an interesting shift that has happened in the last 15 years, I would say, because
So last year she had an exhibit there.
I had an exhibit
And
there.
they said, where can we do? What can we do? And I said, there, put it.
Yeah.
And she said, you said that so quickly. I said, yeah, because it's for the crafts.
Yeah. One thing about Brinda is yes, no.
Yeah.
Very straightforward.
Yeah.
I love that about her. So anyway, about societal things, the one thing that Baya has always faced is the craft है तो expensive क्यों है? I mean, how do you explain expensive? It's because there's so much effort, it's 10 times the effort of a machine made place. And it is 10 times as beautiful as a machine made thing. What you wear as a machine made thing will probably end up looking very, very different from what you wear as something that's crafted or handmade. And you have to value that.
Yeah.
You have to be able to say that this is special, this is distinctive. And truly, I mean, when you put the two together next to each other, you can see the difference. And I feel that is one thing that we've grappled with a fair amount. कि craft है तो cheap होगा. But across the years, awareness has grown. People are now much more amenable to paying for good crafts, good quality work, which wasn't always the case. When I first started, it was much tougher. So that's one change and challenge that we saw. And the other challenge was, मुझे contemporary चाहिए. So I used to say, but what is contemporary? Does this seem not contemporary to you? So then they would say, okay, that kind of thing. So we faced that also quite a bit, that crafts has that context that it has to be traditional. But why? I mean, it doesn't have to be. It can be, it's a skill. At the end of the day, it can be something very much aligned to what you need today. So.
And I'm pretty sure to put craft at such a forefront in all of your lives,
Yeah.
craft, design, art, anything it may be, it requires a different type of motivation. It requires a different type of effort, and you have to kind of, do it for a prolonged period of time to see
Yeah.
what it can grow into, and even for the people that follow after you. So, where do you seek inspiration and motivation when you feel the need for creative reinvention or re-energizing yourselves in this process?
For me, I think beauty just plays such a big role in whatever you do. So not just because we design spaces, therefore, and spaces need to be beautiful, but even in, if I'm going grocery shopping, which I love, like I would wake up very early on a Saturday morning, and with my mom and dad, we drive and we go to Plaza Market, and we pick up vegetables from there because we love and enjoy that entire process. And then, what do we make with it? Like that entire sequence is, very interesting and something that I love. Now, these are, of course, small joys, but I think the everyday, since you're asking, these are the things that, when you love what you do at home, at work, I don't think you're really short of inspiration. For us, we've just been fortunate enough to build in such diverse places, be it Hampi, be it Tirupati, be it Jim Corbett right now, that context plays such a big role and has dictates so much that becomes it's almost like, oh, but I don't know anything about Almora or Jim Corbett, so there's something to learn. What are the finishes and materials that come from here? What are the crafts that come from here? There's a lot of nettle that grows over here, and people weave these nettle mats. Each project is like, you go back to your drawing board. You start from scratch by research, by learning, by understanding what is the kind of climate, people, how do they dress, what do they eat. All of it sometimes dictates what we do, and I think it's just fascinating, and then I don't think you're really short for inspiration, because the places are so inspiring.
So I also, in fact, agree with you completely, because I always say, in fact, I did a whole presentation on life imitates art and art imitates life.
Yeah.
And it was all about, of course, it was about my work and how I, get inspired by it. And I think, like she said, if she goes to the market, the same way I feel, even if I have to put a dish together and cook in the kitchen, I did a lot of that during COVID, but the rest of the time I don't do that because I really don't have the time to. But there was a lot of that creativity of putting whatever you had together in the house at that time. Otherwise, you had to go to the market yourself and you had to go and buy the ingredients yourself. So it was, it's like that, So everything I do, even my home is like that. It's so eclectic. It's various things put together. My paintings are eclectic. Got various layers of, my life is layered. My paintings are layered. Everything is, sort of a lot of things put together. Also, I think it's the way we live, the kind of food we eat. Everything is, it's all related. But yes, a direct answer to your question would be that I was painting for many years, and then I do get bored very easily. So that's when I started volunteering for the festival, for Kala Ghoda Festival, and then I just felt that let me do something different. So I call it creative management is how I look at it. I of course started as a volunteer. I'm still a volunteer. But I do it because I love it and I enjoy it, and I think it inspires me to do better work as an artist. The same way that I think the festival also I feel inspired by my work, my own painting. Somehow it all comes together, And I spent 6 months doing this and 6 months doing that. If you count the amount of hours I put together. But yes, I think life imitates art and art imitates life.
Yeah.
So true.
So for me, again, it's been travel actually. And at the risk of boring you with the same story, you may have heard it before. But once said, I love going and seeking out some form of art sometimes. So I was trying to find Thangka art in Sikkim. And I made my husband come with me, and we just set out and looking for art from the Thangka painting in Sikkim, because that's where it's supposed to have originated. And they were all cheap rip-offs. The government emporiums had cheap paintings and half print and just not nice stuff. So I told my hotel concierge, I said, can you find me some genuine artists? So he said, I'll ask. So I said, okay. Then he asked around his concierge group, and someone said at the edge of where the zoo is and the Hanuman temple in Sikkim, on the edge of the city, there's a village there on the mountainside. You have to go there and you'll find a couple of Thangka artists there. And he gave me some name, Lakpa. I have to go look for him. So I said, all right, I'll go. So I went to the city of Sikkim, and on the edges and near the zoo, and there's a Hanuman temple, and there's a steep mountain on which there's a village. So I went to the first village level, which was not very high, and I said, I'm looking for Lakpa. He's a Thangka artist. Do you know of him? So they said, there are Thangka artists here, but he's not in this village. Go try in the next village up. So we trudged up. And these are steep, right? They're little steep staircases which you have to climb on the hillside and go up into the next village level. So I landed up in the next village level. I said, I'm looking for Lakpa, Thangka artist. So they said, yes, there is Lakpa and there is a Thangka artist, but not in this village. Go to the next one. So I said, I've come so far, may as well go to the third village. So we went to the third village. And in the third village, same thing. Yes, there's Lakpa, but he's not in this village. Try the next one. So I said, I'm not going to keep climbing like this. Don't worry, sister. There's a Thangka artist in the next village. I said, "Theek hai, chalo." He's saying definitely, let me go. So I went to the fourth village, finally at the top. And once I landed up there, I said, "Idhar Lakpa hai, some Thangka artist." I said, "Haan hai." I said, "Oh wow." Then I said, "Kahan hai?" So they showed me to some house over there. So I went into that house, and there were half Nangu children, half naked children running around, buttons on the floor, the woman washing vessels. And it was a tiny little house and no Lakpa, nothing over there. So I asked this lady, I said, is this the house of Lakpa? She said, yes. So I said, but where? So she pointed out to a little machar inside her house on a ladder. And she said, he's sitting up there. And so I said, "Theek hai." And I climbed that little ladder and I went to his machan. And I can't tell you, it was the most beautiful room I have seen, Brinda. Because he was sitting there in the middle of that room and there were open windows and all of it was a view of the Himalaya snow caps. You could see the entire snow-peaked mountains from his house close up. And he was sitting on the floor with his lapis colors, his pearl colors, his gold colors, with the most magnificent Thangka painting that he was working on. So, these are moments of deep inspiration because to me it's a spiritual experience almost. When I see something like this, I feel like, gosh, I'm Christopher Columbus. I have discovered something. So for me, this is some of the moments of inspiration and I go seeking it out whenever I'm truly in need of it. Yeah.
So did you manage to get any paintings?
Yeah. I got some really high quality paintings and he worked with me on a couple of projects after that. Yeah.
Wish you had a slideshow. We'd love to see.
I actually do a story around it. I don't have it today, but I do a story around it. Yeah.
It would be fabulous to see. So
Yeah.
they
You
get
do
their
another one.
materials from nature themselves?
Yeah, these are natural minerals.
Right.
Pearl dust, gold dust, lapis lazuli, semi-precious stones, the zinc dust and
And
stuff.
they're solo, like they don't have support. no
They're
powers.
completely solo.
Wow.
They're on their own. I mean, just imagine one little corner of some village. There's this fabulous artist working away, and no one knows of him. So,
Amazing.
Thank you for your stories. I think as Gen Z and the Gen Z work, entering the workforce, we often like to ask this question to people that, have been working for a while because we feel burnt out very fast. And I think it's, I don't know what it is. I think it's just the fact that we want to hear these stories to, get some inspiration, get some motivation, and maybe try these methods for ourselves. But thank you all for sharing your stories with us. Now I'm going to go into individual questions that I want to ask you all, starting with you. As the Honorable Chairperson of the Kalagoda Association, how has your vision for public art in Mumbai evolved, and what impact have you seen these initiatives have on our community?
So actually, I think I was one of the first people to really, think about public art at all. I think I must have been one of the first to even do murals anywhere in Mumbai, and especially in Mumbai. Yes, you do see them elsewhere, but I don't think you see them in Mumbai. Of course, now you see the scrap
That is
trash
so
that
bad.
is.
No control of that.
Maybe they are inspired to do those things, and it's not really nice. But on the other hand, I think Kalagoda Festival itself was one platform I had where I could, actually display, like I said, not paintings, but at least the inspiration to put up installations in 3D art, and of course it's there only for 9 days. But the point is that people enjoy it, and they get a little aware of what is public art. My father also always used to say that, because we used to travel a lot together, so we used to see all over the world that there was art everywhere. On the streets, even the benches were beautifully made, or even the lampposts were beautiful. And, he had something called I Love Mumbai, and they used to just distribute plants. Now, I think even growing trees, distributing saplings, growing trees, greening a city is public art. That's my opinion. And even if you can't put up good works of art, at least do that. So I think there has been a lot of awareness lately. Good, bad is a matter of opinion, but honestly, I think it's very, very important to have good public art, whether it is even painting public transport. The idea of painting actually the flyovers, many years ago, I approached the government and they just could not understand why I wanted to paint the underbellies of the flyovers and paint them in different. There are some good ones. There is I think START is a very good organization that is doing some wonderful work. So some of the underbellies are really nice, but most of them are not so good, according to me. But it's a good start, I would say.
Unintended.
Pun intended.
Thank you. My next question is to Roshni, and as being recognized as one of India's design disruptors, and also working in a collaborative environment with your, principal architects and designers, how does that model work for you, and how does that shape your approach to design leadership, especially today? And yeah, I just wanted to know a little more about that.
No, it's a fantastic question because, after all these years, I've been with this firm, I'm a part of this firm for 18 years, and I still sometimes get asked that, why didn't you start, why didn't you go on your own? And for many reasons, but primarily for that the wisdom in having a collaborative or working with people supersedes anything. At the end of the day, any profession, if you're an entrepreneur, and Shibani, you would know, or even you, Brinda, when you're doing something on your own, it is lonely. And there are times when you question, you don't have your community to go back and just chat. I mean, this is my problem, or this is what I'm feeling, what do I do? And there's no way I would sort of think of any other way that I could have done this. Of course, when I started as a young designer. Slowly but steadily, we were a much smaller office also at that time. The people who I call my partners now were actually the seniors that I worked with for the longest time, and I think project after project, year on year, now close to 2 decades in, the kind of, I think, connection that we have. I often say this, that I know these people longer than I know my husband, or I probably spend more time with them than I do with my husband, and but that's true, and it's the bit that you were mentioning earlier, the cover story recently that came out. I think one of the questions that they asked was, what makes this partnership a successful one? And I said it's because we like each other, and it's so important. If you're going to work closely as a collaborative, as in a partnership together, it's almost like you're entering, not just a design partnership but a commercial partnership. There are many layers to it, and there's no way I think you can make something out of it if you don't respect and love the other person, on many levels. And it's been a lot of that. It's finding people who you really align with, and they align with you. You all have a similar goal at the end of the day in terms of the work that you want to do, the awareness that you want to bring. It just becomes so much more just fulfilling.
So I want to add to this. So I lead a life as an artist where I'm secluded in my studio. It's lonely, as you said. It's the beginning. It's all lovely because finally I have my own space, and I'm working in my studio and I'm happy. But after some time, I miss being with people, and again I'm back in, say, working in Kalagoda. That's the reason why I work for Kalagoda, is because I'm surrounded by people all the time, and they're all equally passionate and equally, as you said, we have to get along with them, we have to love each other, and that's what we are. And it's a huge team at the end of the day, at the end of 1 year, I would say, because now they've all gone doing their own thing and I'm back to my painting, and then again I'll be back working with them after some time. And some even don't live in Mumbai and they come and work for me. So it's quite a sort of strange thing, you know. It's on one hand, you know, you're all by yourself as an artist and you want to be, and then on the other hand, you want to be surrounded by people. So, but people you really like and love and you want to be with. So.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of strength and wisdom in a partnership or in a collaborative environment, because unless you want it to be a very, you know, self and egocentric practice, then it's a different thing altogether. But if the common goal is to do good work, then I think you do need, you know, several voices to come in. And our office has always been like that. When a new project comes in, the entire team, including interns, will get into something that we call a recce. So the same sort of, you know, plan would be given to that the partners, the senior architects, or the team leads, the interns. We'll all take it. We'll go into different corners of the office and start sketching. Start sketching, putting some thoughts together. We'll give ourselves 1 hour. Come back after an hour. We come back, and then each person, including Shimol, including me, will present that, this is what I'm thinking, and I think this is one of the ways. And each of us, whether it's an intern or the senior partner, the founding partner, will come and present, and then we take the best parts of everything. And I think that's how you make something worthwhile. And it's not a singular voice; it is a collective voice that makes it a.
But it could go haywire
Interesting.
also.
Yeah.
But it's just it's good that it comes together.
Work spouses, so
No, and then design goes through so many layers, because then, there's permissions that come in, there's budgets, there's, parameters in terms of, but that's sort of the beginning where we've always said that we are a very egalitarian practice. And that's, one of the ways.
That's nice. I think even in Baya, we have, always been very collaborative in anything we do. Even if it's something like putting this event together, I think it's just the most fun to collaborate, and especially when you're ideating, in creative ways. You're surrounded by color. I think that's more inspiring than anything else could be. So that's great. And now that we're sitting in this experience center, that everywhere you look, there is a different process to it, and there's a different point of innovation that has been incorporated in all these aspects that you see around you. My last question is to Shibani, and that is, how has the design that has been created by artisans, based on your experiences, shaped up over the years, and what do you think is to come, and what scope do you see it have in modern spaces, in homes, or just to people in general? And how does this impact, how do you think it will serve us in the future, is a question that I want to ask.
So, I feel that the world is becoming more and more robotic, more and more automatic, more and more factory-like, more and more mass-produced. So the appeal of that which is not mass-produced is not going to go away. I feel it's only going to stay and grow. I feel there's a strong need to connect with that which is earthy, natural, made by hand, has some face that is making the stuff, right? And I feel that there's a lot of future for it. I think with AI taking over logic, there's now space to go beyond logic and look for things which are, which has the emotional quotient, which has a connect quotient, which has a, humane quotient about it. And I think that crafts brings that. But having said that, if your question is about artisanal design, I think that artisans and designers have to work together. I don't see crafts, I'm not a purist in that sense. I don't believe that what they have created for years and years needs to be what you put on the table. Crafts is an industry. it has to grow, it has to earn income. And you can only do that if you're in touch with what is wanted today. And in that sense, I think the skills are extremely amenable to change, extremely customizable, etc. So, to me, the two have to work hand in hand, and I think there's a great future for this whole stuff. Synergy and future. And that's Baya, that's what we try to do. We bridge the gap between the artisanal world and the customer world of today, because artisans now live in rural areas away from cities, and the customers are all based out of cities, urban spaces, and the two worlds don't meet. So Baya tries to, get these two worlds to actually connect and meet each other again. Earlier times they were together, the kings and the artisans used to work together. But that disconnect, it has happened, and we are trying to bridge that gap.
Thank you for that answer. And that's all the questions I have today. But I think it's nice that we can kind of revisit why what we do is purposeful in our own ways, and also why, and what women contribute to these spaces, because even though we don't want to always, speak about it in a very evident way, because I personally feel like both men and women contribute in their own ways to every industry and every space. I think it helps other women, younger women, going into industries that they've seen being male-led, and kind of find their own purpose and find their own inspirations through this. So, in this space today, I thank you all for coming here and speaking. And I would also like to thank everyone else for coming here.
No, you have to throw it open.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying that after this. And I would now like to open the floor to everyone. If you all have any questions, please feel free to ask.